Mike Anderson was driving home late one winter evening after an exhausting day at work. Snow blanketed the empty road, and the frigid air seemed to penetrate everything around him. The downtown business meeting had gone longer than planned, and all he wanted was to get home and relax. As he navigated the snowy, desolate road, his car suddenly jolted and came to a stop. The engine warning light flashed on the dashboard, breaking the silence of the night with its unwelcome glow. Frustrated, he pulled over and activated the hazard lights. Stepping out into the freezing air, Mike wrapped his coat tightly around himself and cautiously made his way to the hood. He wasn't a car expert, but he had no choice but to try and figure out the issue. His fingers quickly numbed in the biting cold as he fumbled with the engine, his breath visible in the icy air. Just then, he noticed lights approaching from a distance. Relief swept over him. Help was on the way. As the vehicle drew nearer, he saw it was a police patrol car. The car came to a halt, and two officers stepped out. The older one, David Walker, had a solid build, a thick mustache, and a stern, distant demeanor. The younger officer, Steve Parker, carried himself with an air of arrogance, his smirk making his attitude clear before he even spoke. David raised a flashlight, shining it directly into Mike's face and forcing him to squint. "Having some car trouble?" he asked, his tone flat and unhelpful. "Yes," Mike replied evenly, despite an uneasy feeling creeping in. "The car broke down, and I was just trying to figure out the problem." Steve stood nearby, his arms folded and his expression condescending. "What a great spot for car trouble," he muttered, the sarcasm in his voice unmistakable. Mike kept his hands visible and remained composed, knowing that as a black man alone on a deserted road, the situation could turn tense in an instant. David stepped closer, sweeping his flashlight over Mike's car without asking permission. "Anything suspicious in here?" he said, opening the car door and rummaging through the interior without waiting for a response. Mike's jaw tightened, anger bubbling beneath the surface, but he stayed calm. Steve added mockingly, "You don't mind if we take a look, do you? Can't be too careful with someone like you out here." Their words cut deep, but Mike held his composure, knowing that reacting would only escalate the situation. "Where do you live?" David demanded, his tone sharp and suspicious. "In the suburbs, just a few miles away," Mike answered shortly, keeping his responses measured. Steve smirked, stepping closer. "Cold night, isn't it? Maybe you should warm up with a little exercise. How about some push-ups?" His voice dripped with derision, his smirk widening. Mike's pulse quickened, anger coursing through him at their abuse of power, but he chose to remain silent. These men had no idea he was soon to be their new chief of police. He decided it wasn't the right time to reveal the truth. For now, he would endure their humiliation, knowing he'd soon have the authority to hold them accountable. As the officers continued to mock and belittle him, Mike made a quiet vow. This night, and the injustice he was enduring, would fuel his determination to bring change to the department. He would ensure no one else would have to face the kind of treatment he experienced. Mike knelt on the freezing snow, hands pressed against the icy ground, preparing to do what David and Steve had ordered. Push-ups. The cold from the snow seeped through his clothes, piercing his skin with a stinging chill. All he wanted was to get this over with and escape the humiliating situation. Yet, the contemptuous looks and smirks on the two officers' faces made him realize this was only the beginning. David stood nearby, flashlight aimed directly at Mike's face, his voice sharp and mocking. "Come on, Anderson. A guy like you should be strong, right? A few dozen push-ups in this cold should be no problem, huh?" Steve laughed mockingly, folding his arms beside David. "Or are you so weak that a few push-ups are already too much?" Mike kept his face expressionless, swallowing his humiliation to avoid making things worse. With a brief hesitation, he started doing push-ups, each movement accompanied by the icy sting of the ground beneath his palms. Every push-up felt like a blow to his pride, but he remained calm, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "Hurry up, Anderson!" David shouted, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he watched Mike kneel under their authority. "You're a man. Shouldn't you be stronger than this?" Steve, with a sly grin, added another taunt. "If you can't even handle a few push-ups, Maybe we should take you back to the station to rest a little." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. "Who knows? You might even have a little accident there." Mike felt anger simmering inside, but knew he had to control himself. Any reaction could give the officers an excuse to escalate things. Each push-up cut deeper into his pride, but he maintained his composure, breathing steadily to avoid appearing tired or weak. In his mind, his father's advice about staying calm and giving them no reason replayed, but tonight those words felt far from comforting. David moved closer, nudging Mike's leg as if he were nothing more than an object. "Come on, try harder, Anderson. You're strong, right? Or is your strength only good against weaker people?" David's words dripped with sarcasm and contempt. Mike stayed calm, though every muscle in his arms ached from the cold. He could feel the triumphant gaze of David and Steve as he complied with their orders. Every insult, every smirk, was like a knife digging into his pride. He had built his career from the ground up, proving himself in a world full of prejudice, but now he was being treated like a worthless criminal simply because of his skin color. "I think we should give him a few more exercises," Steve suggested, winking at David. "How about a few laps around the car? That should warm him up nicely." Mike looked at the two officers, his gaze steady but without challenge. He knew they were testing his patience and pride, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. Memories of past injustices surfaced in his mind, fueling his resolve. He knew that soon, once he officially took his position as their new chief, he would have the chance to put an end to such abuses of power. David leaned down, inches from Mike's face, speaking slowly. "Anderson, remember tonight. If you don't want to see us again, it's best to stay away from places like this. Accidents can happen any time, and nobody would believe your story." Mike took a deep breath, holding himself back from reacting. He knew that any hint of defiance could make things more dangerous. Slowly, he stood up, slightly unsteady from his stiff muscles. He looked directly at David and Steve, showing neither fear nor challenge. He knew this wasn't the time for confrontation, but he silently promised himself he wouldn't let this behavior continue. David took a step back, his face still twisted with contempt. "All right, Anderson, go home and remember what we said. Next time won't be this easy." Steve smirked, satisfied as he watched Mike trudge back to his car. "Hope you learned something tonight," he said mockingly, his cold eyes following Mike until he opened the car door and sat inside. Mike sat in the car without starting the engine, feeling the sting of humiliation rise in his chest, mingling with a fierce determination. He wouldn't let this night go forgotten. He would wait until he officially took his position, and then he would stand up to protect others from experiencing what he had endured on this cold, lonely road. He wasn't just enduring humiliation. He was making a vow to bring about change. As David and Steve got into their patrol car and drove off, Mike sat in the dark, feeling his resolve grow stronger than ever. He knew that soon, when the truth was revealed, those who abused their power would face the consequences of their actions. The next morning, the atmosphere at the police station was buzzing as if a fresh wind had swept through. Officers gathered in small groups, exchanging intriguing stories about the new chief expected to arrive. Most had only heard rumors, but everyone knew this would be a strict, decisive leader. The veteran officers, including David and Steve, still thought it was just another rumor, believing the newcomer would soon yield to the unspoken order within the station. As the front doors opened and Mike Anderson stepped in, the room fell silent. Every eye turned to the tall, confident man in his formal police uniform, emanating an undeniable authority. No one knew Mike was the man David and Steve had humiliated the night before, but as Mike entered, his steely gaze and calm command immediately quieted the entire room. David and Steve were standing in a corner, stunned and pale, as they realized that the new chief was none other than the man they had disrespected and forced to do push-ups in the cold only hours ago. Their hearts raced with fear as they realized their actions wouldn't be forgotten or ignored. Without showing a hint of resentment, Mike maintained a calm, professional demeanor, stepping up to the podium to formally address his new colleagues. He made no mention of the previous night's events, keeping an air of solemn authority that froze the room. His presence was a silent declaration of the change to come, a change that could not be evaded. Beside Mike was Thomas, a seasoned officer who had spent much of his career in the police force. Thomas had witnessed countless abuses of power over the years and had long hoped for a leader with enough resolve and fairness to restore the station's integrity. With Mike's arrival, Thomas felt a renewed hope and was ready to support him on this challenging journey. "Chief Anderson," Thomas greeted with a respectful smile, "welcome to our station. I look forward to helping you make this place trustworthy for both our team and the community." Mike nodded, returning a grateful smile. "Thank you, Thomas. It's an honor to work alongside you. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but with the support of dedicated people like you, I believe we can make the necessary changes." Thomas smiled, nodding warmly. His presence beside Mike not only showed his support, but also signaled to the other officers that Mike would not be fighting alone. He had a reliable ally, making him even more resolute in his upcoming decisions. As Mike took the podium, he looked around the room with a steady, commanding gaze. "I didn't come here to make friends," he began in a calm but unwavering voice. "I am here to ensure that this station operates with integrity, fairness, and respect. From now on, no abuse of power will be tolerated, and together we will rebuild the trust of the community we serve." Each word Mike spoke resonated in the silent room, creating an atmosphere that was tense yet solemn. The veteran officers felt the weight of the man standing before them, a true leader, unafraid of challenges and intolerant of wrongdoing. Among the crowd, David and Steve felt Mike's gaze piercing them, reminding them of what they had done the night before. They tried to avoid eye contact, attempting to hide their unease, but guilt and fear were evident on their faces. They knew their actions could no longer be ignored, and that Mike would likely bring their abuse of power to light. "Thomas, we need someone like you, Mike, someone who can truly make a difference. These two have had far too much power for too long. Their wrongdoings have been swept under the rug, but I believe you're the one who can expose them." Mike: "Thanks, Thomas. Real change takes time. We won't rush it. If we give them space to believe everything is still normal, they'll eventually show their true colors. I want everyone to feel safe coming forward, knowing they won't face retaliation." Under Mike's leadership, the police station began to see subtle but significant changes. He organized discussions on ethical conduct, stressing that officers were there to protect the community and that any misuse of power would be held accountable. Mike's genuine approach made a deep impression on his colleagues, who began to see him as a true leader. Officers who had previously kept quiet about David and Steve's behavior started to speak out. Private conversations became open reports as officers shared their own unpleasant encounters and stories from the community. What had once been whispered rumors now painted a clear picture of the abuse taking place. It went beyond cruel remarks or empty threats. It involved real exploitation. Internal reports revealed incidents where David and Steve had used their authority to manipulate and intimidate citizens. One young man had been pressured into compliance after questioning their methods, and a woman had been threatened into silence after witnessing one of their abuses. The environment at the station shifted. David and Steve initially dismissed the change as a reaction to new leadership, but when colleagues, who had once stayed silent, began avoiding them or giving them cold glares, the tension became impossible to ignore. Whispers spread, and more officers came forward with their own stories. The walls that David and Steve had carefully built to protect themselves were beginning to crumble. Mike knew it was time to act. He gathered a team of senior officers and trusted colleagues, including Thomas, to review the evidence they had compiled. "Mike, it's time to move forward. The evidence against David and Steve is irrefutable. They've crossed too many lines to continue hiding behind their badges." Thomas: "This day has been a long time coming. We can't let this go on any longer. It's time to hold them accountable." Mike: "Everything is prepared. Witness accounts, documents, records. There's no need to rush. The truth will force them to confront the consequences." When David and Steve walked into the meeting room, they tried to project calm, but Mike could sense their growing anxiety. He addressed them directly. "Mike, thanks for joining us. I think it's time we had a frank discussion about your actions. David, not sure what you're talking about. Mike, we have more than enough evidence to prove you've been abusing your power. It's all verified. Witnesses. Internal records. You can't hide from this any longer. David flipped through the file Mike had handed him, trying to maintain an air of confidence. But as he read through the pages, his smug expression faltered. The evidence, emails, reports, and testimony was undeniable. Steve sat frozen, gripping the armrest of his chair, his body tense. Mike, you've ignored every ethical standard, using your authority to exploit and intimidate. But now, justice will make sure you answer for it. Steve, this is all a lie. You can't accuse us without real evidence. Mike, real evidence? You'll have it all in the report that will be sent to the board and authorities next week. But perhaps you should read through it yourself before trying to defend yourselves. David, you'll regret this. Mike, I have no regrets in standing for justice, but you'll regret every moment you've spent betraying the trust of this community. David and Steve were removed from their positions while the investigation continued. Anger and frustration boiled inside them, but they knew they had to tread carefully. David, does he really think he can get away with this? He'll pay for this. Steve, he has the evidence. If we retaliate, it'll only make things worse. David, maybe we can't get to him directly, but what about his family? That'll make him think twice. One evening, Mike returned home to find a threatening note taped under the door. Stop, or your family will pay the price, accompanied by a photo of his wife and children. Panic turned to anger as Mike immediately called Thomas. Mike, they think they can intimidate me, but they're wrong. We're not just going after them for justice. We're doing it for my family, for everyone they've threatened. Thomas, be careful. I'll make sure your family's security is tight, and we'll keep an eye on David and Steve's every move. Mike hired a professional security team and moved his family to a safe location. Meanwhile, David and Steve's position continued to weaken. Their schemes fell apart as colleagues stopped covering for them, and their past actions were exposed. David, we can't let him win like this. Steve, it's over. No one is supporting us anymore. Mike gathered the final pieces of evidence, including their threats against his family, and prepared for the hearing. The station was filled with officers, community leaders, and reporters. Mike, keeping this community safe isn't about instilling fear. It's about protection, not intimidation. David, you don't get it, Mike. You think you're a hero? The system will tear you apart. Mike, if the system lets people like you continue unchecked, that's exactly why I'm here. Abuse isn't control, it's betrayal. The supervisor signaled for security to escort David and Steve out. David yelled as they were led away. David, you'll regret this, Mike. You'll regret it all. Mike, I have no regrets. I stand for justice, and that's all that matters. As David and Steve were removed, Mike felt a deep sense of relief. He had fulfilled his promise to the community, proving that justice would always triumph. Those present in the room looked at Mike with newfound respect, knowing they now had the right leader. Mike felt the tension in the air as he listened to the community speak. Their frustration was evident, and he knew he had to act. We'd face consequences if we don't comply, one resident stated, and Mike nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I know, Mike replied, his voice filled with empathy. And I'm deeply sorry for what you've endured. Moving forward, anyone who misuses their power will be held accountable. No exceptions. His words began to have an effect as the atmosphere slowly shifted. One by one, people stood up and shared their stories. They felt his sincerity, and a sense of hope began to replace the fear that had plagued the community. Mike was not content with just words. He took immediate action, organizing joint patrols where officers and residents could connect, share concerns, and foster understanding. The officers, who had once seemed distant, started to feel a sense of duty to the community they served. They found a renewed purpose in their work. Beside Mike was Thomas, a dedicated ally and loyal colleague who played a crucial role in supporting Mike's vision. Thomas was not only a reliable second-in-command, but also a bridge between Mike and the other officers. One evening after a community patrol, Thomas spoke with genuine admiration. Mike, I've seen leaders come and go,
but none have done what you're doing. You've inspired change, not just within the station, but in the hearts of the community. You've shown us that justice still matters." Mike smiled, grateful for Thomas's words. "I couldn't have done this alone. Your support, and the support of everyone here, keeps me going. We won't change everything overnight, but if we stay committed, I believe we can make a real difference." The team's unwavering support fueled Mike's resolve. He implemented workshops focused on professional ethics and social justice, bringing in experts to guide officers on how to handle challenging situations without abusing their power. These sessions reminded the officers of their responsibilities and reignited their pride in their work.
Robert, another loyal supporter, took a hands-on approach, mentoring younger officers and emphasizing the importance of integrity and fairness. One day, a young officer spoke up at a team meeting saying, "Since you arrived, Chief, I've realized we can work with honor and pride. We're no longer forced to ignore wrongdoing, and that means everything to me. Thank you for creating an environment where we can truly believe in what we do." Mike was moved by these words. His efforts were not only transforming the lives of the community members, but also helping his officers rediscover the core values of their work. Each day, he felt closer to achieving his goal of a clean, honest, and justice-driven police force. But Mike didn't stop there. He introduced community partnership programs that gave residents a safe, anonymous way to report suspicious activities. He also established an independent oversight body to ensure that complaints were handled transparently. This was a significant step toward rebuilding trust. One day during a patrol, a young boy approached Mike, gazing up at him with admiration. "I want to be a policeman like you," the boy said. Mike knelt to his level, offering a warm smile. Being a policeman means being brave, honest, and always protecting others. If you promise to do that, you'll be a great officer one day. His words weren't just for the boy. They were a reminder to his team of the true meaning of their work. Under Mike's leadership, the police station evolved from a source of fear into a symbol of integrity and safety. The community began to see officers on the streets with a new sense of trust. Community meetings became valuable spaces for sharing stories, offering feedback, and collaborating on solutions. The bond between police and residents grew stronger, and it was clear that Mike had ushered in a new era. One evening, standing outside the station, Mike gazed into the distance. Confidence and determination filled him. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey, but with the unwavering support of Robert, Thomas, and his team, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had proven that justice could prevail and that integrity and courage could bring about real change. But the road was far from easy. Despite firing David and Steve, Mike knew the power those men once held wasn't easily dismantled. They had shown their bitterness, and Mike had anticipated that they would try to regain control. One evening, after a long day's work, Mike found an unmarked envelope on his doorstep. The note inside was a stark reminder of the battle still ahead. It read, "Don't think you've won. This isn't over. We'll be back, and when we are, things won't be the same. Watch your back, Anderson. We'll find a way to reclaim what's ours." Mike calmly read the letter, his resolve only growing stronger. He knew this wouldn't be the last threat he'd face from David and Steve, but he wouldn't let it distract him from his mission. People like them, who were stripped of their power, would stop at nothing to regain it. But Mike was determined to stay focused. Mike's voice remained calm and unshaken. "You can try whatever you want, David. But remember, justice isn't something you can intimidate or buy. No matter what you throw at us, we'll be ready." The call ended, but The next morning, Mike showed the letter to Thomas and Robert. Their reactions were predictably concerned, but their loyalty to Mike remained unshaken. "I knew they wouldn't give up so easily," Thomas said, his voice filled with frustration. "This is a challenge, but they're underestimating us." "We're with you, Mike," Robert added, his tone firm. "They think they can scare us, but they're wrong." Mike gave them a reassuring smile. "I'm not afraid. We've come too far to back down now. Let them try. We'll always be ready." The days that followed were filled with continued reform efforts, community engagement, and a strengthened bond with residents. Mike knew that their growing support would help them stand strong against any future resistance. One evening, after a community meeting, a middle-aged man approached Mike, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I used to believe the police could never change, that they'd always misuse their power. But you've given us hope. You've proven that there are still those who stand for justice." Mike's heart swelled with pride. Change was happening. Despite the challenges ahead, he wasn't alone. The community was beginning to believe in him. He couldn't let them down. However, even as Mike continued his work, he couldn't shake the looming threat from David and Steve. The fight was far from over. One night, just as he was about to leave the station, Mike received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold and familiar. It was David. "Think you've won, Anderson?" David's voice was icy. "We'll be back, and next time, it won't just be letters. You'll pay for what you've done." He had witnessed too much injustice to back down now. He wasn't doing this for fame or personal gain. He was fighting for everyone who had been hurt by those in power. Every threat, every act of resistance only reaffirmed his commitment to protect and serve the people. Mike's mission was not just about facing those who abused their power. It was about reaffirming the true meaning of being a police officer, to serve with integrity, protect the vulnerable, and stand for justice. The journey was long and filled with challenges, but Mike knew he was not alone. With the unwavering support of his colleagues and the community, he would continue to push forward. No matter the threats or obstacles, Mike Anderson was committed to his mission to bring justice and integrity to the people he served. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next video.